Hey everybody, I am Missy.
And I am April.
And this is our podcast,
Sheelanagig.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for listening. Each week we explore our own Sheelanagig, a woman whose strength and perseverance has led her to greatness, who continues to empower us, inspires us. It could be somebody you've heard of that we just like to share a little more about. It could be somebody who never got her due credit and that you absolutely should know about.
Yes, like your last one, Pocahontas.
Well, everybody had heard of Pocahontas.
Yes, exactly. That was my point.
Yes,
but you probably didn't know her real story.
No, I didn't really know her real story until I really explored it. So, so that's what I mean. Maybe it's somebody you've heard of and you're just going to learn something totally different or more, or, the myth. We're going to uncover the myth or whatever it might be. Or it may be somebody that you've just never heard of that needs some light. Give these Sheila some light.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, how are you, April?
I'm well, thank you.
What's been going on?
What's going on?
Still dealing with the fires a little bit.
Yeah. A little bit.
Yeah.
Things are getting better. A friend of mine whose house, I think I mentioned this last time, she was in she lived 4 blocks from Eaton Canyon.
Ooh.
And so they had to, of course, evacuate. Her house is still there, which is great.
Oh my God, that's such good news.
They were able to move back in and get electricity and utilities, and they're just really grateful.
That's good. A friend of mine in Pasadena, very near La Cañada, was evacuated, and they got back into their home recently as well. And she told me there was this weird thin layer of soot, like black soot, on every single surface.
Oh, gee.
She said it was just daunting. Like, how are we ever going to clean all this up? And, and imagine too, like what that soot and ash is. It's probably all chemicals. It's,
Right. Yeah.
So she was kind of in the process of finding maybe a cleaning company that could come in and help. But I didn't even think about that.
Right.
And it goes to show you, that anything can get in during these fires. So I'm just glad, I'm feeling grateful. I'm glad that we're safe. I hope that you're safe. And I'm just continuing to pray and put out positivity and strength to everybody who's suffering right now in Los Angeles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully we can rebuild this beautiful city. All right, but let's get to it. Tell me, I'm excited. I always get excited. Like, who could her Sheila be?
Well, I feel a little bit guilty because once again, our amazing podcast editor, Dana Sullivan, gave us this Sheila. And before you had a chance to read her email, I opened it up, fell in love.
Oh, and Sheila.
And I was like, it's mine. You can't have it. And Missy's a stylist, so she might have really, really, really enjoyed this Sheila.
Oh my gosh, now you really got me.
I know, but it was so much fun, and I just took a deep dive
and
into...
I just want you to be proud of me because I got the same email, but you beat me to it, and you said, I want to do this one.
Yes.
I really wanted to look, but I didn't. I didn't look. I was like, okay. You got first dibs. It's all yours. I'm not going to even look at who it is.
Very gracious. You were very gracious.
Okay, but I am excited. And Dana always comes up with like killer freaking Sheilas.
Rocks. I love this.
Yeah, and Jean too. Her husband, right? The two of them are quite a team.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm excited. I'm ready.
Okay. Well, when you think about British youth subculture, you're probably thinking like the beatniks of the 60s or maybe even the punkers of the 70s. You're probably not thinking 1950, right?
Well, probably not. Okay.
But it turns out that there was a teenage generation before the beatniks of girls who actually turned stodgy, affluent look of male Edwardian wealth on its total head. And these gals were called teddy girls, or Judies. And the idea of a girl gang made up of rock and roll mania who was dedicated to going against the grain and smashing gender norms isn't something we, like I said, associate with the 1950s, but here come the teddies.
The teddies. Wait, and this is England, right?
This is England. Yes,
okay.
This is in Britain.
The teddies.
And they were actually, they were part of a larger counterculture movement, and the girls got overlooked for the counterpart of the teddy boys, of 1950s London. And the Teddy Boys, or Teds as they were sometimes called, was a youth-driven British subculture for a period of time.
Okay.
And the Teds came after World War II ended, and the post-war economic boom was in its full swing, and it was suddenly the end of austerity, where they had rationing and luxury items weren't available. The economy was booming, and even the most poverty-stricken or lower-class people suddenly had access to more financial means and more items than ever before.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And when this rationing ended and everyone was breathing easier and looking back to take back frivolous pre-war comforts like music and fashion and media, all getting popular again, the British fashion industry made a calculated debacle. They decided, particularly the tailors of Savile Row, which were apparently the tailors of the elite wealthy, wanted to bring back Edwardian suits for wealthy young clients who worked in the city of London. And the Edwardian dandy fashion of the day, and this was men's fashion, came into being when King Edward VII was reigning in Britain between 1901 and 1910. So now that the war was over and people had money,
Right.
and these Savile tailors wanted to cash in on that, they wanted to bring back these Edwardian suits, but the young, elite, wealthy Londoners, men, just weren't interested in it.
Okay.
They didn't buy it. So what happened was, as the upper class rejected this style, a new breed of working class youths, these guys that came to be called Teddy Boys or the Teds, grabbed this clothing because they ended up in pawn shops and secondhand shops and
so
available
because
cheap.
It wasn't successful, the trend, it kind of just got sent to thrift stores and it died.
And so it became available to less wealthier class.
That's the first thing I was thinking. Well, how could they have afforded it? But
Right.
that makes sense. Okay.
Nobody wanted them. The elite didn't want them, so they became cheap and affordable. And the word Ted came from like a nickname for King Edward the Seventh during that Edwardian era when those clothes as garments were really high fashion. So anyway, these guys grabbed onto these clothes, and it became they're dressing up all over the place. It was like a gang of guys, and they were having fun in their little Edwardian outfits. And they came from like bombed out working class neighborhoods in East and West London.
Okay.
And they didn't exactly wear the clothing to its intended seriousness because they wore Brill cream coiffed hair with it and these American chunky creeper shoes. And so they were upsetting the upper class because they were wearing upper class clothes.
I love it.
Also being, lower class mischievous boys, right?
Right.
And so these guys quickly became the least favorite people of many Londoners. And these Teddies and their female counterparts, which are my Sheelas, were actually the first group that set themselves apart as a culture based just on being teenagers. They were the first teen counterculture.
Okay.
And we don't hear about them, and I'll tell you a little bit why they fell into obscurity.
I feel like I've heard of Teddy Boys.
Yeah.
I've heard Teddy Boys,
but not Teddy
But I've
girls.
never heard about Teddy girls.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm curious about here.
So initially, both the Teddy Boys and the Teddy Girls developed a subculture around jazz and big band music. They loved music and movies, and they danced, they hung out in record shops. But as the culture evolved, the media exaggerated the coverage of the movement and really branded the Teddy Boys or Teds as trouble. And their reputations weren't helped when the American rock and roll scene exploded in Britain in 1956, because the Teds loved the American pop rock music, and they went a little wild.
Yeah.
There was a film called Blackboard Jungle that came to London theaters, and it was a movie about rebellious youth, and it had a rock and roll soundtrack to it. And when the Teds heard the movie in the theater, it was said that they caused a little bit of a riot. They caused a sensation in the movie, and every time the movie played, it was a rioting event all over the UK.
Like Rocky Horror Picture Show or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were wild, and they were raucous, and they were bad. And
so they kind of took it, they made it their own sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
I totally would have been a Teddy girl. Oh, no doubt.
So although the reports of the Teds engaging in fighting and rioting was really a small segment, there was a group that got really out of hand and were violent and even doing racist kinds of acts of violence. The media really seized on the idea that all Teds were feral youth. And people would say to their, children, like, "You're acting like a Teddy," and that was the ultimate scorn or warning that you're being bad.
Oh my God, I love that.
So they really developed this troublesome reputation. Again, most of the violence and the vandalism was very exaggerated by the media, who didn't like these youths running around in these falutin clothes.
Falutin clothes?
But there were a few of them that actually went down that really dark, dangerous path. Most of the Teds were associated with some petty crimes like bootlegging, because after the war there was a little bit of prohibition, and they were doing some bootlegging. I mean, it wasn't prohibition, but they were bootlegging. And there were instances, though, as I said, of gangs who were doing more fascist rioting and using razors and knives. But that wasn't the norm. So signs kept coming up in public places that said, "Youths wearing Edwardian dress will not be admitted." They were getting banned all over London because they were so awful.
Awesome.
But I share all of this to set the scene for our Sheelas, the Teddy girls, who were almost completely forgotten about and obscured by the Teddy boys and overlooked by the media and society until 2005. When photographs emerged that were taken by a wonderful photographer named Ken Russell. And I'm going to talk about Ken and his photographs a little bit more in a bit. Teddy girls were distinctly different from the Teds, but again, reports were much more interested in the guys and brawling and being awful than they were interested in a group of teenage girls who basically loved music and went to the movies in these really strange outfits. And
awesome outfits.
Here's what we know about the Teddies today. They're very young. They were 14 to 16-year-old girls who, like the Teddy boys, came from London war-torn working-class neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. They were mostly from Irish immigrant families who'd settled in the poorest districts of London. And they typically dropped out of school by the time they were 14 to go to work in offices and factories. And despite the fact that they were paid lower wages than boys, only £2 per week, they did, after the war, have a little bit of discretionary money and embraced this Ted outfit. And again, it was an Edwardian male kind of look. Right. And the first time I remember ever seeing a male silhouette as fashionable for women was, and I may be dating myself, was Annie Hall, like Diane Keaton. And I know that Betty Davis and the actresses of that era, also Katharine Hepburn, wore masculine suits.
How about Marlene Dietrich?
Yes, and played this played these
her.
Powerful women. And these Teddies were very much reminiscent of that kind of look. Mm-hmm. So when the war ended in England, most of the women and girls were very happy to return to feminine clothes and wear dresses and, ditch the Rosie Riveter kind of outfits that they all wore during rationing and when they went to work in a lot of the male jobs, that whole scene. But our Teddy girls couldn't get enough of staying in pants and wearing men's clothes. And they had a very flamboyant show-off style. And the girls took to that theme. And part of it was about, like, the counterculture scene, but it was also an effort to like raise their middle finger at the gender norms of the time and say, no, we don't want to go back to dresses. We want to wear what we want to wear and express ourselves.
Absolutely.
So anyway, the silhouettes that were considered appropriate for women just were not the teddy girl style, let's just say. They wore male draped jackets, and in one journalist interview with a former teddy girl named Mary Tuvey, she listed the essentials of a teddy girl wardrobe as being turned up jeans, a coat, and something to tie around your neck. But the female teddies also juxtapose that masculine Edwardian silhouette with very feminine accessories, like a little clutch bag.
Aww.
And what was so ironic is clutch bags are pretty, impractical. And here they were dressed, like these tough women, or in these men's outfits with their little clutch purses and their cameo brooches and straw conical hats. And they came from the East and the West London, and they would meet each other and switch and mix outfits so that they could extend their styles and interpret their teddy look in their own unique ways.
Right.
Some wore long jackets and gladiator sandals. Others wore pencil skirts or cuffed jeans. And definitely draped collar jackets was part of the thing. And I really find the look so chic and sexy and powerful.
I gotta look this up. I mean, I know.
Oh, I have some photographs that I will share. And interestingly enough, one of the accoutrements was to always have an umbrella. It was an essential accessory, but it was never opened even when it was raining. The idea is you just always had your umbrella. You didn't use your umbrella.
That is a weapon.
Yeah, and because money was scarce and these women had very low wages, they made a lot of their outfits. They did buy from secondhand shops and pilfer, but they were very creative. They did a lot of DIY with secondhand clothes and sharing garments, and they just really matched the masculine Edwardian theme or style with very feminine
Innovative.
additions.
Innovative and fun. Definitely. I definitely would.
And they were unapologetically working class. Their style of dress alone set them apart in a crowd. And most teddy girls also wore very unconventionally short hair at the time. They wore their hair in the same kind of quiffs that the boys did. I don't know if they used Brill cream. And when the fashion trends were skirts and long hair in the mainstream culture. And former teddy girl Mary Tuvey even remembers having her friend Rosie Price dye her hair a scandalous blonde.
Ooh.
She said, I was frightened when she thought about how she cut her hair short because her dad would have killed her. So I wore a turban around him to cover that up. He never knew she'd cut her hair.
Oh, my gosh. It's interesting because these girls you said are 14 to 16. It's a small demographic there, 14 to 16-year-old girls in the early 1950s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is this something they kind of aged out of? Like they got to college and they were like, okay.
No. Well, first of all, they had a bad reputation. People didn't like them. People were afraid of them. Parents would, like I said, threaten their daughters, don't be a teddy girl.
Right.
You hussy. So I'll tell you what happened. Their style originated, interestingly enough, from like high couture clothing lines that celebrated high-end elite Edwardians.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting.
Yeah, so they were not just wearing what they wore for fun, although that was apparently a big part of it, but they were also turning up their noses to the upper echelon, the upper class, and thumbing their nose at the gender stereotypes all at the same time.
Sure.
They were said to be self-assured, and they pursued the things they liked in a way that was highly unpopular, like I said. They scandalously accompanied their male counterparts to things like concerts and dance halls. They collected records and magazines, and they congregated at diners to listen to jukeboxes. And you're not going to believe this, but they talked to boys in public.
Oh, my gosh. Talk to boys.
So when Ken Russell photographed several teddy girls, he was fascinated by the whole group of youth that everyone else was overlooking and running away from and degrading. And unfortunately, the teddy girls weren't remembered by many other than Ken Russell, who immortalized them through his photographs. And the photographs were found around 2005. over 50 years after they'd been taken.
Oh my gosh. And these were the first photos revealed at
Yeah, they weren't, see, these girls weren't glamorized or appreciated, or they were trying to be ignored and dismissed and
Okay.
and not liked. And so the first time the photographs really came to life was in 2005, when people started looking at them with a positive spin. Like, wow, look at the brassy guts of these girls. Look at the creativity.
I love it.
Yeah, just the sheer fun of dressing like that.
Oh yeah.
Well, the photos have now been published in a book by Dinian Books, and it's available online. And even in black and white photographs, the self-assuredness and the confidence of these girls just shine absolutely through. And as the Teddy boys fell into obscurity, unfortunately, and this is what happened to the Teddy girls, they took the girls down with them. Instead of being remembered as the first counterculture group, the whole Teddy theme, the Teddy boys ended up being mostly known for violence and their participation in racist riots, even though it was not the behavior of most of the Teds. And so they were kind of a culture that got squashed and forgotten. And while the boys still have this reputation of being these punk youths and doing all this horrible, vandalism and violence and being racist and having riots, the girls just kind of got forgotten. They got left out. But thanks to the photographs of Ken Russell, a group of girls, and the few interviews, like one with journalist Eve Dowd, we do get a glimpse into the world of these electrifying young women. And the photographs depict worlds at conflict with one another, because on the one hand, the clothing was like dandy tailored flair from the Edwardian era, and the photographs that Ken Russell took were taken in the backdrop of post-war rubble and bomb sites following the war.
Wow.
So it showed really the side that these that these kids came from poverty and lived in war-torn areas.
Yeah.
And although they were wearing this finery and enjoying this finery and putting their own mark on it, they were poor and they had very little resources, and they were living among rubble.
Right.
So Russell remembers 14-year-old Teddy girl Jean Rayner. She had an attitude, he said, by the truckload. No one paid much attention to the Teddy girls before I did them, though there was plenty on Teddy boys. They were tough, these kids. They had been born in the war years, and food rationing only ended in about 1954, a year before I took these pictures. They were proud. They knew their worth. They just wore what they wore, he said.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So he was introduced to Josie Bucknan, a Teddy girl who introduced him to some of her friends, and Russell photographed them in the 50s on Notting Hill. Or in Notting Hill, I should say. After his photographs were published in a small magazine in 1955, Russell's photographs remained unseen for over half a century.
Oh, what a bummer, man.
Yeah, well, part of it was he became a successful film director, so he kind of went on. But in 2005, his archive was rediscovered, and guess what? So were the Teddy girls.
Did he rediscover his archive, or did
I'm
somebody
not clear
else?
how it got resurrected, but
Right.
there was a resurgence of articles and interviews with the former Teddy girls.
That's
And
so cool.
yeah,
I mean, they're so badass. I
know.
I love it.
Yeah. It's sad that such an interesting and elegant style of dress for young people became associated with so much negativity.
Well, I think, you can say that about, punk rock too, kind of.
Right. That's true. That is true.
And I don't know where you draw the line, between, I mean, I was kind of a punk rocker, but
Right.
I used to always joke that, when I was an adult, I was kind of a punk rocker, but I realized I was too nice to be a punk rocker. So it was really hard for me, because although I looked like a punk rocker, I was really friendly, and I would think, I just can't pull this off. I'm just too nice to be a punk rocker. That's what I would think. But again, that kind of speaks to people making judgments about groups of people based on what they look like, you know?
Right. And one of the reasons why I thought it was kind of fair that I took this story away without you looking at it is because you are a stylist. And one of the things you taught me was to have fun with dress, like to just play. Don't take it so seriously. Don't get so caught up in how you think you're supposed to be. And that's, to me, what both the Teddy boys and the Teddy girls really enjoyed. And yes, in some ways they were making political statements about social class, and for the girls they were making statements about gender equity and gender stereotypes, but they were also having fun. I mean, they just really...
Oh yeah, having a... I mean, in high school, I won it. I think I said this before. I'm boasting about myself. I was really proud of it. I won most original in my senior class, but I would always just throw shit together. You know, I remember I had a red union suit, a union suit that you wear in the winter when it's very cold. I'm from Michigan. And I would, have a wraparound skirt around it, and then all these crazy bracelets, and I shaved one side of my head, and I used to do all these drawings on the side of my head. And I remember some of the popular, like the jocks would be like, "Why do you draw on yourself? What is that? What is on the side of your head?" And I would say, "Sperm." Just to totally fuck with them. They'd be like, "You are so weird and gross."
Oh my God.
But I thought, it's so funny. A couple years ago, I was at like a CVS in the Detroit area where I grew up, and this girl was like, "I remember you. You're the girl who used to draw on her head."
Do you still draw on your head?
Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool at the time. It would take me an extra hour in the morning to kind of, get my whole scene painted on the side of my head.
Well, yeah.
But I was always throwing like weird shit together, Of course, I had the ripped fishnets and,
of course.
But I would just always find just odd clothing and pair it together. And I remember sometimes I'd walk down the hall and people would sing Cyndi Lauper, which kind of irked me a little bit. Be like, "Oh, she's just so, new wave. I'm not new wave." But, girls just want to have fun. They would sing that. And I'd be like, "Fuck you." But yeah, I mean, I totally embrace the idea of just, having fun with your clothing and not, subscribing to any style per se, or,
Right.
I mean, think about being goth as well.
Absolutely.
Think about cosplay. I mean, there's so many different types of fashion out there that are just like a big fuck you, do whatever you want to do.
Well, it's so funny.
I'm proud of it. Like the Teddy girls.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was always a pretty conservative dresser, and at one point early in my career, I was working for a bank, and I came to the determination that this just wasn't me, and I couldn't do it. And as I was getting ready to leave the bank, this was in the 80s, and we had to wear dresses. All the female had to wear dresses back then. And one day I showed up for work in a mini skirt, black tights, and combat boots.
Aww.
Which for me was like the height of rebellion. And that was the worst part. When I came in, instead of everybody going, "What are you wearing?" they were like, "Oh, you look so cute." And it was so terrible. I wanted to be like reprimanded.
Oh.
And no, they thought it was adorable. So that was my little fashion rebellion.
Wow.
It was a flop.
Wow. I love that. I'm wearing my combat boots right now. My Docs,
Well, what's funny is my daughter wears mini skirts, combat boots, and tights all the time.
She's adorable. Sarah is such a little fashion statement when, she is just...
As is Ellery, your daughter.
My daughter, it's interesting because I actually did a little shopping with her yesterday, and boy, we couldn't be any different in terms of our styles. And there was a lady, and she just kind of looked at us and she said, "I can relate to each of you." She's very jock. Like if I have to say what she is, I mean, and again, I shouldn't, she's just
she wasn't though before, and I wonder, what her next season.
Well, maybe she's
be.
rebelling against her rebellious mother.
Well, there you go.
Right? That would be the best way to do it.
But I have to say,
my little jock.
I wouldn't have thought of Ellery that way, but I know she's gotten a lot more into sports this year.
Yeah, she's super into volleyball, and it's fine. She's adorable. I don't care what I don't care what she wears. She's adorable, But I think everybody should just express themselves in the way they want to express themselves.
That's the point. Yeah, the Teddies were the first group in Britain whose style was self-created. Teenagers self-created, and I just wanted to bring to light because they were so fun. Contrary to what you might assume, the smart dress didn't make the Teds more respectable.
Yeah.
In that day, it actually made them more intimidating. And I think that was the thing about the women. They looked intimidating.
Wait, you brought pictures.
Yes.
It's funny because my phone is turned off because it just, I don't know, even when it's on silent, it makes weird noises. So I always turn it off and I couldn't look.
Oh, so you couldn't look them up.
No.
Right?
So I'm so excited that you actually have pictures. Look at
Yes, and I will do my best to load them onto our website and also onto our graphic. It's a little hard. Our graphic's kind of tiny. But these women were like Marlene Dietrich with their long legs and their defiant cigarettes and short hair, and then their feminine little touches, their brooches.
And look, I have a little tie around my neck just like the Teddy Girls. Just in honor of the Teddy Girls, I wore my little scarf around my neck today.
And Missy's
Not
always
really,
saying a brooch would look darling with that. So
I know, I love adding a little brooch.
Girl.
You can add a brooch to anything, honestly.
Well, this was a short story. They were short-lived, but I wanted to bring them to light because they were just so cool and so fun.
No, they're so cool and so fun. I want to learn more. And of course, that's another thing about our Sheilas. We hope that it inspires you to do a little research on your own.
Yes.
That happens to me after every episode we do. When
Yes.
April turns me on to somebody new, I spend, at least a couple hours doing some extra research. Because like, what? I got to find out more about this. I always have to. When you were talking about them talking to boys, I just had this memory. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I had this memory of when I was a kid. We had a big backyard and it bordered on the school. And so people are always kind of putting stuff in our yard, from the school or whatever, and including a lot of porn, which is kind of funny.
Oh.
Yeah, we had like a whole like collection just because people would like toss it over the fence, and I used to charge people to see it. But anyway, I digress. But I also had this little fort kind of in the area where all kinds of things would show up. And we had a little club with a couple of my friends and we would hang out in our little fort. And I don't know when this happened or what, but my dad used to, do yard work. And so one time I guess he was doing yard work and he went into our little fort and he found this list of things to do with boys. And of course, he didn't really say anything at the time, but years later, like he had it, he kept it. Because we were probably like, what happened to our things to do with boys list? But it was like, he read it aloud. He was like, read with boys, talk to boys, sing with boys, look at boys. Like all the things to do with boys. We had made like pages and pages of things to do with boys.
Aww.
And my dad thought it was like the funniest thing in the world. So I was just thinking about that. Not only did I talk to boys, I did a lot of other things with boys for sure. For sure. I love them. I want to dress like this tomorrow.
I know. It's really cool dressing. I think it's really fun.
It is super fun. It's it's definitely, with the little tie around the neck, it's kind of got that 50s inspired thing. And then they have the cute little men's jackets on.
Yeah.
I love them.
But they also have defiant looks on their face. Like, just come fuck with me.
They're so proud looking, you know. And I mean, it does take a lot, I think, to be somebody who can be free thinking and independent in that way. So much so that you can dress however you want and tell the world to fuck off. Like, hey, exactly. I'll dress however I want.
And that was their attitude. And it was just a shame that whole movement got obscured by the boys.
By a bunch of boys.
By their boys.
By a bunch of stupid boys.
Actually, it was just a small percentage of them that just sort of took over the brand. And you know.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like this is quite a subculture. This is not super common. It wasn't super common. So
it was like a little blip in history, and I'm just grateful to Dana for plucking it out and sharing it.
Yeah. Oh, and here's a picture of Rosie Price.
Yeah.
Oh, look at Rosie Price. She's smoking her cigarette.
Smoking a cigarette.
Oh, she is so red. She's got a little brooch around her neck.
Yeah. That was so fun, the way they would just pair these odd feminine elements with.
Yeah, but then she's got the super short boy haircut.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I kept saying that throughout the whole thing. I love it. I love it. But I do. I love it.
It's great.
Oh my gosh, the Teddy Girls. So go look up the Teddy Girls.
Go look up the Teddy Girls.
I think I'm going to go for a Teddy Girl look tomorrow, just in honor of this episode.
And you will have to take a picture.
Because it's fun. Why not be a Teddy Girl? You know, for a day, for
Why
a week,
not?
for a month, right?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, April. Thank you for bringing this fun episode. And thanks, Dana, for turning us on to the Teddy Girls. And if you guys have suggestions for us, by all means,
Yes,
bring
let
it.
us know.
Bring
We
it.
get-
And, it could be somebody, too, that it could be your mother. It could be your
Right.
grandmother. It could be, we love doing interviews, too. We're interested in interviewing
Yes.
some people. So please keep this in mind and bring those ladies to our attention. Bring those Sheelas to our attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So signing off. It's actually a beautiful sunset,
Yeah,
despite
it
the
is.
fires. Yeah, I hate to say it, the fires kind of make the
Sunset more pretty.
more
I
beautiful.
know.
It's
Isn't it
very
sad?
eerie. It's a
Yeah.
very foreboding, eerie sunset, but it's beautiful.
It is.
You can still see some of the redness in the sky. But signing off here from LA and the fires, we're just hope everybody's safe and
Stay safe, stay well.
thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Sheelanagig on the bed.